The auction hall smelled like burnt wiring and old dust. Rows of aliens sat on benches that were never built for human bodies, and Daniel Cole had to fold himself into a corner seat just to fit. He had not eaten a proper meal in 3 days. His last cargo ship had been taken by a bank on a station 2 jumps away, and now all he had left was a battered coat, a half-empty credit chip, and a stubborn refusal to give up. He was not here to buy anything. He had wandered in because the door was open and the heat inside was better than the cold outside. But then the auctioneer, a thin creature with too many eyes, pulled up a new listing on the floating screen above the stage. The image showed a plain green and brown world. No rings, no strange colors, nothing that looked special. The listing read, Utter Rock. Full planet. Mineral rights included. Starting price, almost nothing. Daniel blinked at the number. He checked it twice. A planet, a whole planet, for less than the price of a used shuttle engine. He looked around the room, waiting for a dozen hands to shoot up. Instead, the room went quiet. Some of the aliens shifted in their seats. A few got up and left without a word. He leaned toward the alien sitting next to him, a short being with blue skin and no visible ears. Is something wrong with it? He asked. The alien did not look at him. No one bids on that one, it said. No one. Why? The alien stood up and walked away without answering. Daniel turned back to the stage. The broker running the auction was a nervous-looking being named Warden ISS, who kept glancing at the door as if hoping someone would stop the sale before it even started. ISS cleared his throat and repeated the starting price, waiting for a bid. No one raised a hand. Daniel felt something strange in his chest. It was not greed. It was something closer to stubbornness, the same feeling he got when a machine told him a repair was impossible and he fixed it anyway. He raised his hand. 1 credit chip, he said. His voice cracked halfway through, but he did not lower his arm. The whole room turned to look at him. Warden ISS's eyes widened, and for a moment he looked like he wanted to refuse the bid entirely. But rules were rules, and a bid was a bid. Going once, ISS said slowly, almost hoping someone would outbid him. Going twice. No one moved. Sold, ISS said, and the word came out heavy, like it cost him something to say it. Daniel walked up to the stage on shaking legs, half expecting someone to laugh and tell him it was a joke. Instead, ISS slid a data pad toward him with the deed already prepared, as if it had been sitting there for a long time, waiting for someone foolish enough to sign it. You understand this sale is final, ISS said quietly. No refunds. No exceptions. I understand, Daniel said, though he understood nothing at all. As he pressed his thumb to the pad, an old clerk sitting near the back of the room, someone who looked like he had been part of the furniture for decades, muttered just loud enough for Daniel to hear. Humans never come back from that one. Daniel turned around, but the clerk had already gone back to his work, not looking up again. Daniel told himself it was just an old alien talking nonsense, the kind of thing people said to scare newcomers. He had heard plenty of strange warnings before, on plenty of strange stations, and none of them had ever meant anything. Still, the words stuck to him like a splinter he could not pull out. He walked out of the auction hall holding the deed to an entire planet, a deed that had cost him less than a meal back on his home world. He should have felt like the luckiest man in the galaxy. Instead, as he stepped into the crowded station corridor, he found himself glancing over his shoulder, half expecting Warden ISS to come running after him, begging to cancel the deal. No one came. Daniel found a quiet corner near a supply shop and pulled up the deed on his own battered wrist device. The planet was listed under an old catalog number, Utter Rock, and beneath the basic information was a single line marked in a small, easy-to-miss font. Status: delisted from standard trade routes. Reason: unspecified. He frowned at the screen. Delisted planets were not unusual. Sometimes it just meant a planet had no working supply stations nearby, or its atmosphere was too thin for easy travel. It did not have to mean anything sinister. He told himself that 3 more times before he believed it enough to keep walking. That night, sitting in the cheap rented bunk he could barely afford, Daniel searched the public records for any history of Utter Rock. He found almost nothing. A handful of old expedition names. Dates that stopped rather than continued. No survey reports. No trade updates. No settlement records. Just names, followed by silence. He should have felt afraid. Instead, A strange excitement crept into him, the kind he used to feel back when he first started flying cargo runs into unmapped space. He had a planet now, a real planet, and whatever secret it was hiding, he intended to find out for himself. He fell asleep with the deed still glowing softly on his wrist device, and for the first time in months, he did not dream about debt collectors or broken engines. He dreamed of green fields under a strange sky, and something far away, watching, waiting for him to arrive. The old cargo shuttle groaned as it dropped out of the star lane, its engines coughing like they had not been trusted with a long trip in years. Daniel gripped the controls tighter, watching the small dot on his screen grow into a full planet. He had spent the last of his savings on fuel just to get here, and there was no turning back now even if he wanted to. He had expected a dead rock, something gray and cracked, maybe with a thin, useless atmosphere, the kind of world people bought for mining rights and nothing else. What filled his window instead made him lean forward in his seat. Utter rock was green, not the dull green of old photographs, but a deep, moving green, like the whole surface was breathing. Clouds curled in patterns that did not match any weather system he had ever studied, spiraling in slow circles that never seemed to break apart. Here and there, he spotted dark shapes floating above the surface, too solid to be clouds, too still to be storms. His shuttle systems chose that exact moment to flicker. The lights on his console dimmed, then brightened, then dimmed again. His navigation screen froze for 3 full seconds before catching back up, showing him coordinates that did not match where he actually was. He tapped the panel, muttering under his breath, blaming old wiring and cheap parts. But some small part of him noted that everything had worked perfectly fine right up until he entered orbit. He found a wide, flat clearing near what his scanners marked as the largest structure on the planet and brought the shuttle down as gently as the shaking engines allowed. The landing gear hit solid ground with a heavy thud, and for a long moment, Daniel just sat there, listening to the engines power down, listening to the strange quiet that followed. When he finally stepped outside, the air hit him first. It smelled sweet, almost like fruit left too long in the sun, mixed with something metallic underneath that he could not name. The ground beneath his boots was not soil exactly, more like packed moss that gave slightly with each step, as if the whole planet were slowly breathing under him. He walked toward the structure his scanners had flagged, expecting ruins, maybe an old mining outpost. What he found instead made him stop in his tracks. It was not built. It had grown. Twisting shapes rose out of the ground like roots frozen mid-motion, forming walls and archways that curved in ways no architect would design on purpose. The material looked like stone from a distance, but up close it had a faint grain to it, almost like wood, almost like bone. Vines the color of rust wrapped around the base, though he could not tell if the vines were part of the structure or simply grown over it. He circled the strange building slowly, running a hand along its surface. It was warm, not sun-warm, but warm the way skin is warm. He pulled his hand back fast. Further along, half hidden by tall grass, he found the first sign that he was not the first human here. A rusted crate sat tipped on its side, its lid long since rotted away. Inside were tools, old scanning equipment, a broken water container, all covered in a thin layer of moss. The brand stamped on the side of the crate was Human, a company he vaguely remembered from years ago that had gone quiet from the trade networks. He kept walking and found more. An entire camp, tents collapsed but still standing in shape, cooking equipment left exactly where it had been used, a logbook sitting open on a table as if someone had simply stepped away for a moment and never come back. There were no bodies, no blood, no signs of a struggle, no wreckage from any kind of attack. It looked less like an accident and more like everyone had simply stood up, walked away, and vanished. Daniel picked up the logbook carefully, brushing dirt from its cover. The last entry was dated over a decade ago. He flipped through the pages, most filled with normal survey notes, temperature readings, soil samples, nothing unusual. Then, on the final page, the handwriting changed, growing smaller and more rushed. It says the last line simply read, "We are not alone here," and it knows we noticed. Daniel closed the logbook slowly and looked around the empty camp. The wind moved through the grass in a way that felt almost too smooth, almost too deliberate, like something large exhaling. He thought about turning back to his shuttle right then. He thought about it for a long moment. Instead, he tucked the logbook under his arm and kept walking deeper into the ruins, telling himself he had come too far and spent too much to leave now without answers. Behind him, unseen, the grass shifted where no wind had touched it, and something ancient noted, quietly, that a new visitor had arrived. 3 days had passed since Daniel landed, and he had not slept well on any of them. He kept his shuttle powered down to save fuel, using a small hand lamp to explore the ruins during the day and returning to sleep inside the cramped cockpit at night, doors sealed, lights dimmed, ears listening for sounds that never quite came. He had found 5 more abandoned camps by now, spread out across the grassy plain in a wide circle around the grown structure at the center. Each camp told the same story. Equipment left mid-use, meals half-eaten, logbooks that grew stranger toward their final pages, then stopped completely. He sat cross-legged on the ground near the 4th camp, going through a stack of old data drives he had pulled from a broken storage case. Most were corrupted beyond saving, but one still worked, flickering weakly when he connected it to his handheld reader. The recording that played was not video, just audio, rough and full of static. A woman's voice, tired and shaking, spoke slowly, as if choosing each word with great care. Day 41. We keep feeling like something is grading us. Not attacking, not talking, just watching and reacting to how we act. Bring a knife out, and the wind gets colder. Panic, and the ground shakes just a little. It is testing us, and I do not think we are passing. The recording ended abruptly, cutting off mid-breath. Daniel sat still for a long time after it finished, staring at the small device in his hands. He thought back to his own arrival, the flickering lights, the sudden shift in his navigation readings the moment he entered orbit. He had blamed old wiring. Now he was not so sure. He stood up and looked around the camp with new eyes, no longer just seeing abandoned equipment, but searching for something else, something watching. The grass around him rustled without wind. He froze, lamp raised, heart pounding harder than he wanted to admit. Nothing appeared. No shape stepped out from the tall grass. No creature revealed itself. But the feeling remained, heavy and certain, that he was being observed, studied, measured against some invisible standard he did not understand. Over the next 2 days, small things kept happening. A tool he had set down carefully would be moved slightly when he returned. Once, he heard footsteps behind him, light and careful, and turned fast enough to catch only a blur of movement disappearing into the grass, too quick to identify. He began talking out loud to whatever it was, mostly out of nervous habit, sometimes out of genuine curiosity. "I know you are there," he said one evening, sitting near a small fire he had built from dry branches. "I am not here to hurt anything. I did not even know this place existed a week ago." Nothing answered, but the wind, for just a moment, seemed to pause completely, as if something far away had stopped to listen. On the 6th day, while searching through the largest of the abandoned camps, Daniel found something buried beneath a collapsed tent, wrapped tightly in waterproof cloth to protect it from the weather. It was an old transmitter, battered but intact, its small light blinking steadily, still powered somehow after all these years. He knelt down and studied it carefully. It was broadcasting, had been broadcasting the entire time, sending a repeating distress signal out toward the stars. He checked the frequency against standard emergency channels and felt his stomach twist. The signal was on the correct frequency. It should have been picked up by rescue networks decades ago. It should have brought help running. No one had ever answered. He pulled up what little trade network data his handheld could still access and searched for Utter Rock's official status once more. This time, buried deeper in the records than before, he found a flag attached to the planet's listing, a quiet administrative note left by the Frontier Registry years ago. All distress signals from this location to be logged and ignored. Reference restricted file, access denied. Daniel stared at those words for a long time. Someone, somewhere, had known people were in trouble here. Someone had chosen not to help. The planet had not just been forgotten by accident. It had been deliberately abandoned, buried under enough red tape and restricted files that no one would ever come looking. He turned off the handheld and sat quietly in the fading light, the old transmitter still blinking beside him, faithfully broadcasting into a silence that had lasted for years. Whatever was watching him from the grass, whatever had studied every human before him, had done so without a single rescue ship ever coming close. He was completely alone here, in every sense of the word, and for the first time since landing, that thought scared him more than the shifting grass ever could. Still, he did not pack up his things and run back to his shuttle. He sat by the small fire, staring out at the dark tree line, and quietly promised himself that whatever this planet was testing him for, he intended to understand it before it decided anything about him. The rain came without warning on the 7th day, thick heavy drops that fell in perfectly straight lines despite the wind blowing sideways through the grass. Daniel had never seen weather behave like that before, and he stood under the collapsed remains of an old tent, watching it with a mix of fear and fascination. That was when he saw the figure for the first time, clearly, not just a blur in the grass. It stood at the edge of the tree line, tall and thin, with gray mottled skin that blended almost perfectly with the bark behind it. Its eyes were large and dark, fixed directly on him, unblinking despite the rain. Daniel's whole body went stiff. He did not reach for any weapon, mostly because he did not have one, but some instinct told him that reaching for anything sudden would be a mistake. "I see you," Daniel called out, his voice steadier than he expected. "I am not here to fight." The figure did not move for a long moment. Then, slowly, it stepped out from the tree line into the open rain, moving carefully, like someone who had learned long ago to never move too fast around anything. "You talk to it," the figure said, its voice rough and accented but understandable. The others did not talk. They only ran, or fought, or hid. Daniel blinked, rain dripping down his face. "Talk to what?" The figure studied him for a long moment before answering. "The choir," it said finally. "It is what watches this place. It is what took the ones before you." Daniel's stomach tightened. "Took them where?" The figure did not answer directly. Instead, it gestured for Daniel to follow, moving toward a narrow gap between two large roots that Daniel had walked past a dozen times without noticing. Underneath was a small hidden shelter, dry and surprisingly well built, clearly lived in for a long time. Once inside, out of the rain, the figure introduced itself simply as Rel. It was not human, though its shape was close enough to pass for one in poor lighting. Rel explained, slowly and carefully, choosing words like someone speaking a second language they had learned entirely from listening rather than teaching. "Long ago," Rel said, "before my people, before your people, something older built this place. Not a planet by accident. A planet on purpose. A test." "A test for what?" Daniel asked. "For everyone," Rel said. "Every species that finds this world eventually. The choir studies you. It watches how you react to fear, to loneliness, to things you do not understand. It decides if you deserve to know more, or if you should be quietly removed." Daniel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain outside. "Removed how?" Rel's dark eyes lowered slightly. "Not killed, not exactly. Absorbed. Changed into something that serves the choir instead of leaving it. The ones before you, all of them, tried to fight it once they realized what was happening. Every single one failed that test." Daniel thought of the abandoned camps, the panicked final logbook entries, the ignored distress signal still blinking faithfully after all these years. "And you?" he asked. "How are you still here, still yourself?" Rel managed something close to a tired smile. "I stopped trying to win against it. I only try to survive quietly, staying small, staying unnoticed. It has mostly forgotten me." "But you," Rel said, leaning forward slightly. "It has not forgotten you. It has been watching you closely since the moment you landed." Daniel remembered the flickering shuttle lights, the moved tools, the pause in the wind whenever he spoke aloud. "What does it want from me?" "The same thing it wants from everyone," Rel said. "To know if you are worth allowing into the wider galaxy's old secrets, or if you are just another threat to be quietly erased. It has judged thousands of visitors over more years than I can count. Almost none of them passed. What happens if I fail?" Rel did not answer that question directly, and the silence that followed told Daniel everything he needed to know. Outside, the rain slowly eased, the strange straight drops fading into something closer to normal weather. Rel studied Daniel carefully, tilting its head slightly, the way someone might study an animal doing something unexpected. "You are already different," Rel said quietly. "The others feared this place and hid it. You walked through the camps of the dead and kept asking questions instead of running. That is rare. That is very rare." Daniel let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. So what do I do now? Rel rose slowly, moving toward the shelter's narrow entrance, glancing back once. You keep doing exactly what you have been doing. You stay curious instead of afraid. It is the only thing that has ever caught the choir's attention without ending badly. As Rel disappeared back into the rain, Daniel sat alone in the small dry shelter, turning everything over in his mind. He was not just exploring a strange planet anymore. He was being tested by something ancient and unknowable, something that had already judged and erased every human who came before him. For the first time since arriving, Daniel understood exactly what he was up against. And strangely, instead of fear taking over completely, a small stubborn part of him simply thought, quietly and firmly, "Let it test me then. I am not leaving until I understand this place." The ground split open without warning on the 9th day, a long crack tearing across the field just 10 steps ahead of where Daniel was walking. He stumbled backward, catching himself before falling, and stared at the widening gap in front of him. Steam rose from somewhere deep below, carrying that same sweet, metallic smell he had noticed on his very first day here. He did not run. His legs wanted to, every instinct screaming at him to turn back toward the shuttle and never look at this planet again. Instead, he forced himself to stand still, breathing hard, watching the crack slowly stop growing on its own. "That is new," he said out loud, his voice shaking only a little. "Is this the test now?" No answer came, but the crack in the ground did not close either. It simply stayed there, waiting. Over the following days, things grew stranger and harder to explain. The trees near his camp changed shape overnight, branches twisting into new patterns that had not existed the evening before. Sometimes he heard voices carried faintly on the wind, voices that sounded almost, but not quite, like people he had once known. Once, late at night, he heard someone calling his name in a tone eerily close to his old flight instructor, a man who had died years earlier in an accident that had nothing to do with this planet at all. He did not answer the voice. He simply sat very still until it faded away. Rel visited him occasionally, always cautious, always keeping some distance, watching more than talking. During one visit, Rel explained that these events were not random. "It is testing your mind now," Rel said. "Fear breaks people faster than any physical danger. It knows this. It has learned this from every visitor before you." "How did the others react?" Daniel asked. Rel's expression, as much as Daniel could read it, turned grim. Some tried to fight it directly, attacking the ground, the trees, anything they thought might be the source. Others panicked completely, running blindly until they collapsed from exhaustion. A few tried bargaining, offering things they thought it might want. None of it worked. The choir does not want fear or anger or desperate bargains. It has seen those reactions 1,000 times over. Daniel thought about that carefully. Then what does it want? Rel studied him for a long moment before answering honestly. "I do not know for certain, but you keep reacting differently than anyone before you, and it keeps changing its tests because of that. That alone means something." That night, the ground beneath Daniel's small camp began to hum softly, a low vibration that grew stronger the longer he sat there. Instead of running, he pressed his palm flat against the moss-covered dirt, feeling the strange rhythm beneath his hand. "I know you are testing me," he said quietly, mostly to himself, mostly just to fill the silence. "I do not fully understand what you are or what you want, but I am not going to pretend I am not scared, because I am. I am also not going to attack something I do not understand, and I am not going to run from a planet I already paid for with my last credit chip." He almost laughed at how ridiculous that last part sounded, said out loud to an ancient alien intelligence that had erased every human before him. But the humming beneath his hand seemed to shift slightly, growing softer, almost curious. The following morning, Daniel woke to find the crack in the earth from days earlier had closed completely, the grass already growing back over it, as if it had never existed. The twisted trees had settled back into more familiar shapes. The whispering voices at night stopped entirely. Rel arrived not long after, studying the changed landscape with clear surprise. "It has never calmed down this quickly before," Rel said. "Not with anyone." Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead, exhausted but still standing. "Maybe it is finally getting bored of scaring me." Rel did not laugh, but something in the alien's expression softened slightly, something close to genuine curiosity replacing the usual caution. Or maybe, Rel said slowly, it is finally seeing something worth studying instead of erasing. That evening, sitting by his small fire, Daniel pulled out the old logbook he had found on his first day, rereading the final desperate entry once more. We are not alone here, and it knows we noticed. He understood now exactly what those words meant, understood the fear behind them completely. But where that fear had ended in silence and disappearance for every human before him, Daniel felt something different settling into his chest. Not fear exactly, though the fear was still there underneath everything. Something closer to determination, stubborn and quiet, refusing to let this planet decide his fate without a fight of understanding rather than violence. He looked out at the dark tree line, at the strange sky above, and spoke one final time before finally allowing himself to sleep. Whatever you are deciding about me, he said softly, I am still here. I am still asking questions. That has to count for something. Far beneath the ground, in patterns of thought too old and too vast for any human mind to fully grasp, something ancient considered his words carefully, and for the first time in 10,000 years, began to reconsider everything it thought it knew about the value of a single, stubborn visitor. On the 14th day, the grown structure at the center of the plane finally opened. Daniel had walked past its sealed entrance nearly every day since landing, always finding it closed tight, the strange grain of its surface giving no hint of any door at all. That morning, he woke to find a wide opening had formed overnight, smooth edges curling back like a flower unfolding, revealing a soft golden light glowing from somewhere deep inside. Rel found him standing outside the opening, staring in with a mixture of caution and disbelief. It has never opened before, Rel said quietly, standing a careful distance away. Not once, in all the years I have hidden here. Daniel took a slow breath. I think it wants me to go inside. Or it wants to finish its judgment somewhere private, Rel said, though there was less fear in the alien's voice than Daniel expected. Daniel thought about his last 14 days, the abandoned camps, the shifting ground, the twisted trees, the whispering voices at night. He thought about every human before him who had come this far and never returned. Then he thought about the small, stubborn feeling in his chest that had kept him standing here instead of running back to his shuttle at the very first sign of danger. I have come this far, he said finally. I am not stopping now. He stepped through the opening alone, leaving Rel watching nervously from outside. The inside of the structure was nothing like he expected. Instead of dark tunnels or strange machinery, he found himself standing in a wide, open space filled with soft golden light, the walls curving gently around him like the inside of some enormous seed. Faint patterns moved slowly across the surfaces, shifting shapes that looked almost like handwriting in a language he could not read. A voice spoke, not from any single direction, but from everywhere at once, deep and slow, carrying a weight that made the air itself feel heavier. You are the first in 10,000 years to walk this far without fear driving every step, the voice said. Daniel forced himself to stay steady. I am plenty afraid, he said honestly. I am just also curious. Curiosity keeps winning. Yes, the voice said, something almost like surprise carried in the single word. That is precisely why you are here, and why the others were not. The golden light around him shifted, and for a brief moment, Daniel saw faint shapes moving within it, images of countless visitors from countless species stretching back further than he could imagine. Some fought, some ran, some begged. All of them, in the end, faded from the light completely. I am called the choir by those who fear me, the voice continued. I was built long ago by those who came before even the oldest civilizations your galaxy remembers. My purpose was simple. Judge every visitor who reaches this world. Determine if they deserve access to what remains of that ancient knowledge, or if they pose too great a danger to be allowed to leave with it. And everyone before me failed, Daniel said quietly. Everyone, the voice confirmed. Not because they were weak, but because they answered the unknown with violence, or fear, or desperate attempts at control. They tried to conquer what they could not understand, rather than simply understanding it. Daniel thought about the crack in the earth, the twisted trees, the whispering voices at night, all the tests he had faced without ever raising a weapon or turning to run. And I did not fail. The golden light pulsed once, warm and steady. You did not fail, The weight in the air eased slightly, and the voice continued, softer now. I am old, and I am tired of erasing those who arrive here. For every visitor who fails, another world remains cut off, another distress signal remains ignored, another truth remains buried. I had begun to wonder if judgment itself had grown pointless, if no species would ever pass again. What happens now? Daniel asked. Now, the voice said, I release what I have kept sealed. The blacklist on this world ends. The old distress signals, silenced for years by outside hands that feared what I represented, will finally reach the wider galaxy. And you, who chose patience over conquest, will become this world's keeper, trusted to guide whoever comes next. Daniel felt something loosen in his chest, relief mixing with disbelief. I bought this planet for almost nothing, he said slowly. And now you are telling me it is worth more than I ever imagined. It was always worth far more than its price, the voice said. Most simply never lived long enough to understand why. The golden light faded gently, and Daniel found himself standing once again near the entrance, the structure's opening still wide behind him. Rel rushed forward, studying him carefully, searching for any sign of harm. You are still yourself, Rel said, almost disbelieving. I am still myself, Daniel confirmed, a tired smile spreading across his face. Later that day, standing beside his old shuttle, Daniel sent the first successful transmission this planet had broadcast in over a decade, carrying with it every buried expedition log, every ignored distress call, every silenced truth the choir had kept sealed away. Across the wider galaxy, in quiet offices and busy trade stations, old records long marked as closed suddenly reopened, and for the first time, questions were finally asked about a world called Utter Rock, and about the stubborn human who had somehow succeeded where every other visitor before him had failed. Daniel Cole had come looking for the cheapest planet in the galaxy. What he found instead was a test that had broken every species before him, and a simple truth the choir had waited 10,000 years for someone to finally prove, that patience and curiosity could accomplish what fear and force never would.